The war to end all wars, World War I, the Great War, it's really known by a bunch of different names. But it was really the first conflict of its type the world had ever really seen. What actually caused it? That's what we're going to take a look at today on Mr. E's Classroom. Hey ladies and gentlemen, Mr. E here. We're going to take a look at the causes of the Great War today. Specifically, we're going to look at what the underlying causes of this conflict really were. So pay attention to the video and hopefully you'll have an answer by the time it's over. So the first major cause of the Great War was imperialism. You should remember what imperialism is. We've already done a unit on it. But remember that imperialism is when a stronger nation basically controls a weaker nation, either through outright power or through economic control or possibly even political control. When we talked about imperialism, we talked about it in the context of the United States. As far as the Great War is concerned, though, it's really about imperialism of European powers. Basically, all the different European powers were kind of fighting and arguing back and forth to see who could have the biggest empire, who controls the most territory. And kind of that back and forth is eventually what led to a big fight. The second major cause of the Great War was a thing called nationalism. Nationalism is basically when you have a very strong sense of national pride, or that idea that my country is better than your country. Back at the turn of the century, there was a huge wave of nationalism kind of sweeping across Europe, and every country was basically saying, we're better than everybody else. And if you keep saying that you're better than everybody else and keep saying that you're better than everybody else, eventually it gets to a point where somebody's going to say, oh yeah, well prove it. The Great War is when some of those countries decided they were going to prove it. The third major cause of the Great War is a thing called militarism. What exactly is militarism? Well, it's basically when you build a big giant military. How does that factor into the Great War starting? At the turn of the 20th century, there's a huge industrial wave kind of sweeping across the globe, mostly pushed by the United States industrializing. There's a lot of new industrial technology available, and countries use this technology to build massive militaries. And as one country would build up their military, their neighbor said, hey, we need to do the exact same thing just in case. Remember when we talked about nationalism just a second ago? Because of this, in Europe, you start to see these huge, unproven militaries. And it's only a matter of time before one country decides they want to prove that the military they've built is the best. The fourth cause of the Great War is a thing called the alliance system. I always call it the I've got your back if you've got my back system. Under the alliance system, countries all over the world started setting up what were called defense agreements. Basically, these were guarantees that if one country went to war, another country would go to war alongside them. This was partially because of the big giant military buildup that we just talked about. Smaller European countries weren't in the same position as some of the larger European countries to build as big a military. So they said, hey, maybe if we combine forces with somebody, our two militaries could outdo the other country's militaries. And because of this alliance system, it really just kind of sets up a powder keg that's just waiting to be set off. In the Great War, there really are two major alliances we need to know. The first one is one called the Triple Alliance. These are also known as the Central Powers. I'll show you a map here in just a second, and I think you'll understand why they have that name. They also sometimes get labeled the bad guys because these were the countries that actually lost the Great War. At the heart of this alliance was a country called Austria-Hungary, and they were kind of backed up by Germany and Italy. The second major alliance we need to know is called the Triple Entente. Entente is really just a fancy French word that just means alliance, because we can't have a triple alliance fighting a triple alliance. That makes no sense. Sometimes they're also called the Allied powers, and they get labeled the good guys because this was the side that basically won the war. At the heart of this alliance was Russia, and they had France and Great Britain on their side. Interestingly enough, though, towards the end of the war, Russia actually drops out about the time the United States enters. So really the United States kind of takes their place and joins alongside France and Great Britain in the Triple Entente. Here's that map I was just telling you about. If you look at the map, the red countries are the Triple Alliance, and kind of the light green, minty colored ones are the Triple Entente. Can you see why the Triple Alliance also gets the nickname the Central Powers? And really, it's kind of this geographic location of the Triple Alliance that really kind of sparks off the Great War. The fact that the Triple Alliance is flanked on both sides by their enemies, essentially, really makes things incredibly tense, and it doesn't take much for the whole thing to just go off. In the next video, we'll actually talk about what the spark was that really set off the Great War. Ladies and gentlemen, today we really only have two takeaways from our video. Takeaway number one is pretty simple. Remember that there were four main causes of the Great War: imperialism, nationalism, militarism, and the alliance system. The second takeaway is pretty simple too. Remember that there really only were two main alliances during the Great War. On one side you had the Triple Alliance, and on the other side you had the Triple Entente. Hopefully you got some great notes, ladies and gentlemen. Be ready for that quiz when it happens in class. Until next time, remember, don't stop learning.